The following episode contains sensitive topic information that may not be appropriate for young listeners, as well as religious or other views that may not reflect those of the Sirens team.
Good evening, Sirens. How are you doing out there, listeners? We hope you're doing well. School's getting back into full swing here, and we're busy bees. But hey, Ryan. Hey, Lindsay. Hope you're doing all right.
Hey.
All right. Good seeing
All
everybody.
right, now. You what?
I said good seeing everybody.
Yeah, good seeing you too. We are excited tonight because we are pre-recording our first episode of September Spooktacular. We're going to have guests on for you all month in September, and we're starting with our very first guest, and he calls himself the American Hauntstorian, and his name is Allen Sircy. And Ryan came across Allen at Smoky Mountain Horror Fest recently and got his info, and we thought, wow, this would be an interesting guest. So Allen was very generous to say yes when we asked him to come on the show. So we are going to bring him in, and as Lindsay's bringing him in, I'm going to read a little bit about him, and then we'll let him take it away. Hi, Allen.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. So what I have is that Allen built websites and developed apps, and then jumped in head first and published his first book in 2018. And then he took that detour into the paranormal, and from Gallatin, I guess that's how you say it?
Yes, ma'am.
Gallatin, Tennessee to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He spent the past years studying history and digging into ghost stories, one of our favorite things. And his book series is called Southern Ghost Stories. And he said he is called the Hauntstorian for his ability to not only find forgotten and untold ghostly tales, but also explaining the backstory and the reason for the alleged hauntings. So welcome. I like that name, the American Hauntstorian. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I didn't coin that phrase. I was doing a tour. I do haunted tours in Hendersonville and Gallatin up here in Sumner County, Tennessee, where I live. And this lady said, well, what do you do? Are you an author? I said, well, I'm really more of a historian. She said, no, you're a Hauntstorian. I'm going to steal that. And then I did. So I put it on my business card.
Yeah, that's great. Now tell us a little bit about your background there.
Oh yeah, the backdrops. It's some books I have coming out. I think one of them's already out. The Monsters is the Fear and Folklore. Yeah, you mentioned how the Southern Ghost Story series years ago. I did the Southern Ghost Stories Philadelphia book, and I got some pushback because Philadelphia is clearly Northeast, but I've done like 10 books on that, or Tennessee. So most of my series were Southern Ghost Stories. But I was up in New Jersey and Philadelphia for a couple summers, and while I'm up there, hey, I'm just going to dig in. And so since then, I've kind of branched off and done ghost stories and graveyard tales for the series in the Midwest or in the Northeast. But the Fear and Folklore, it's weird stuff I've encountered, like cryptids, monsters, and then like the witches. And the witch thing is kind of like, they had witch trials in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Tennessee, Virginia. It wasn't just Salem. In fact, the template for Salem came from Boston from a few months earlier for a trial they just took and carried over to Salem for 1692. So I just get all this weird stuff, and what do I do with it? So I'll start a new series, Fear and Folklore, and but the witch book's a lot of fun. It's not just witch trials; it's just weird witch stories. Like there's stories about folks who believe they're hexed by a witch, and the only way to break the hex is to go kill the witch. So they go out on this crazy adventure to kill the witch. It's people are weird now, but they were even crazier back then.
Yeah. Okay, now I want to ask you a quick question because I read somewhere that you had created the Ghost Map app.
Yeah, and that was something. It's kind of my journey is just nuts. I guess it's 2013, 2014, 2015, wherever it was. My wife and I went to Savannah, Georgia, and I'm sure you guys done ghost tours, right?
Yes, yeah.
So we did a ghost tour, and we had a good time. We booked one for the next night. And we were walking around Savannah, and they took us just 4 places, and they charged like $40. It's kind of a ripoff. So it really hurt my wife. She said, someone should just invent an app, has all the haunted places for $2. So and she's like, you should do it. I'm like, I don't, not a code. I've never done it before. So, well, that summer she taught me into it. I bought a Mac and I spent the whole summer teaching myself how to build code. And I made App for Savannah, and then I got bored and I did Nashville, New Orleans, St. Augustine, Boston, Salem, and just kept going. It just I had the templates, so why not? And I just went around the United States touring these places and just making my apps. And the apps are long gone. Google and Apple make it so hard. They want you to constantly re-up the app like every 6 months and change it for new devices. And it just got to be more of a hassle. I mean, it was fun, but I kind of got my education doing that. But it was a fun little side project, but it kind of just stuck my toe in the water doing those apps.
That sounds really cool.
That's impressive because coding is kind of tricky to teach yourself how to do that.
Oh man, there was one night I stayed up to like 2 or 3 in the morning. I guess I started like at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and I stayed I was up 12 hours working on nothing but coding. And then I put it in the computer, I hit execute, and like one little semicolon somewhere thrown the whole thing off. Like the whole 2 hours was just wasted. So yeah, it took a whole summer to learn how to do it. I'm not a genius by any means. Like I'd watch YouTube videos from kids over in India explaining how to develop the code, and I would sit and tinker with it. And I finally had the template down. That's when I just jumped all in.
Yeah.
Wow,
but that sucks cool. Though. I wish that Google and Apple would just like if you have an app, because that's a really cool app. I wish that they could just let it exist so people could still use it instead of having to revamp it every 6 months, because that's so cool.
It was fun, and it was really neat. Like I kind of impressed myself doing it, walking around Savannah. These places would pop up that I punched in, so it was pretty neat while it lasted.
Yeah, I bet Savannah had a ton of options too. I loved it. We went to Savannah a few years. It's been a few years now.
Couple years.
And loved it. We did a couple ghost tours down there, visited some houses and stuff, and I'm sure there was a ton of different places. But like an app like that would have been so helpful because
it would.
We got down there and we were like Googling places to go, but at that point, I mean, it was the next day starting, so it was tricky.
Yeah.
And that's normally one of the first places, like I said, when I'm in the mood to do something like that, you're on there like haunted locations or best tours or, unsolved cases or something. You're trying to find something that's got some legitimacy to it, not just something for show, and I'm always trying to find something, 9 out of 10 times you're going to find something that's just kind of off the wall, like you're talking about. We went on a cool one when I was in Salem. We done, there, that was kind of cool. But the whole atmosphere in Salem, around Halloween and stuff is really awesome anyways.
Salem, to me, it reminds me of a cold Savannah. It's an old port town. And, well, I mean, they had the witch thing, but yeah, it's a cool place, but it's a cold Savannah, like I said.
Yeah, but like I said, I would have paid money for your app. I'd have been like, that's it right there.
Especially doing what we do.
I mean, I got so tired of having to sit down and like relearn the formatting they wanted to do, and it got to be just too big a hassle. I let them go.
Mm-hmm. Well, take us back in time and tell us a little bit about your journey into the paranormal. I was curious, did you have any experiences when you were a child, or what sparked your interest?
I mean, my journey's nuts, and I could talk all night. I guess it was 0506. My great grandmother, she was pushing 100 years old, and my uncle and my aunt decided she needed to move to a nursing home. Mm-hmm. So my uncle called me and said, "Hey, can you come move into our house? It's part of an estate, and the insurance will not cover the home if it's empty." So at the time, I was living in an apartment, and so I agreed, and I moved in. I thought I'd be there for a few months until they got things settled. But I was there for 10 years. And the first night I was in the house, a trash can moved in the middle of the night. It was over by, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Nashville, but it was Harding. It was off Harding Place. It's called Traveler's Rest. It was this sort of mansion right behind the house. In the 1300s, it was a Mississippi and Indian village. In the 1800s, it belonged to Judge John Overton. He was Superior Court Justice. He was friends with Andrew Jackson. He was Jackson's attorney, confidant. He also had a working slave plantation. So all kinds of, weird, bad stuff in that corner of the universe. I move in, told you trash cans are moving. I had a lamp in the den. I would go to bed at night. I'd turn it off. I'd wake up every morning. It would be on. I finally got it where I just unplugged it and stuck it in the attic. The TVs, I come home in the afternoon from work, all the TVs be on in the house. This weird stuff happened all the time. So I hopped the fence one day and I walked over to the mansion. I said, "Hey, I live right over here and weird things are happening in the house. And, was this place haunted?" Oh, sir, I can assure you here we talk about the Overton family and the Indians that preceded them. There's no such thing as ghosts. It's not haunted at all. Okay. So I go to hop back over the fence, and I see a lady pull up, and she gets out of her car, and she's wearing the period attire. She's a volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, man, I live right over here. Things are happening in the house. Is this place haunted? Oh, honey, there's so many ghost stories, but I can't tell you about them. Okay, I get it. And that's the thing. Like, before 2020, a lot of historic sites wouldn't embrace the ghost stuff.
Yeah.
The Hermitage in Nashville, the Andrew Jackson's home, they wouldn't do it. The Lodes House in Franklin, Tennessee, where the Battle of Franklin took place, they wouldn't talk about it. Rosemont and Gallatin, they wouldn't talk about it. When I did Ghost of Gallatin in 2019, the director of Rosemont said, do not put my name in your book. I can't be associated with this. They told me some stuff off the record. When 2020 happened, I'm sure you guys know, a lot of sites got strapped for cash. They had to shut down. So they started doing ghost tours, investigations. They were doing things to bring in income. And that's why it's kind of grown in popularity a lot, because the historical sites are finally starting to embrace it and realize that it's good for business.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
One positive that came from 2020.
Yeah. There are just so many more people today, it seems like, that are interested in the paranormal. I mean, any streaming platform is going to have tons and tons of paranormal shows or podcasts or whatever. It just seems like it's grown exponentially just since Ryan and I were younger. And we always liked we were always weird paranormal geeks anyway. Yeah. So tell us about how you got started writing your book series.
Oh, man. It's a crazy story. So in 2019, my wife and I were expecting a little boy in late March. Well, it's a Monday night, 2 weeks before he was due. I was sitting on the floor putting together a toy box. My wife comes in. She's all upset. What's going on? The VP for a company came in and they closed their division. So it's like, I didn't know what to do. I had a good job, but I knew I couldn't provide for a wife and a 2-year-old or a baby. I started praying about it, started listening to podcasts, and I listened to one show, and this guy said, "Oh, you're never too old to go back to college." They got me thinking. It's like I've never, I'm 40 years old. I can't go back to college, but I've got this education from building these apps. I'm gonna write a book. I'll write a book. How he's, just knowing now what I knew, or vice versa. I never would have done it, but yeah, I jumped in head first, and I stay up late every night, got up early every morning. I toured all the store sites in Gallatin. I had some relationships because Gallatin was in the Nashville app, and I took stuff from the app, and I just boots on the ground talking to people and going to the archive, befriending the town historian, and I did Ghost of Gallatin in 2019 around August, September when I released it, and it did really well. Like it shocked me. Like I thought it was gonna be something kind of fun, kind of neat, and it exploded. And so like, I'll do another one. So I did Murfreesboro, and if you're familiar with Middle Tennessee, Murfreesboro is the only town in Tennessee, or the only town in the country that had 3 Civil War battles. So everything is haunted in Murfreesboro. The square burned down numerous times. Nathan Bedford Forrest was up here just raising all kinds of hell, fighting with everyone. And I went from Murfreesboro to Franklin, and I did 3 books on Nashville, and I just kept going. Knoxville, Chattanooga. I went on. This year I've got several books coming out. So yeah, I'm too dumb to quit.
How many books do you have now before the ones that are coming out this year?
I think it's around 20. I think I have 25 of the ones coming out this year.
Wow, that's great! Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and how great is that you get to do something that you enjoy and people are loving it? Yeah,
it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of travel. I was in New York City. This year alone, I've been to Florida twice. I was in Alabama a couple of times. I was in New York City about a month or two ago. I'm always on the go, looking for new stories, and it's fun, but it gets a little grinding sometimes.
Yeah. And so you've got a little one. You've got a young child now too. Does your wife and little boy get to go with you?
No. He's 5. He's too young for some of this stuff.
Oh, okay.
He loves Halloween. When he gets older, he really do. We try to keep this, separate from him.
Yeah, sure. Well, what's your approach to, like, when you go to a place, when you choose a location to go to, what's your approach to research? And, like, do you research first before you go, then get there, talk to people, or?
It's all the above. old newspapers are a great resource. Going to archives, talking to historians, going to historic sites, just looking at old Facebook groups, people talking about old homes and stuff. I remember when I did the downtown Nashville book, I found a newspaper story for when they were building this big office building, and I think there were a couple of folks that fell down the elevator shaft. So I'm thinking, well, that's a recipe for disaster right there, a recipe for a good ghost story.
Yeah.
So I went to the location. I found a security guard worked there for a while. I said, hey, I'm just curious, is this place haunted? So, man, it's funny you say that. The elevator goes up and down, the bathrooms, weird things happen. And he's like, why'd you ask me that? I was like, well, and I told him the story. He's like, well, that makes all kinds of sense because it's the elevator.
Wow, yeah.
I bet that guy was like, well, that makes so much sense now. And then every time after that, he was probably so scared.
Yeah. When I did the Gallatin book, another funny story just from like the archives and digging, there was a guy, there's a place on the square, a psychic from Nashville had heard it was haunted. She came in and she went there and like she started to climb the stairs. She touched the banister and went to walk up and she said, I can't feel my shoulder. I've got a splitting headache. So I started digging and I found, I think an old newspaper article where the guy who owned the building, like after the Civil War, or the plot of land this place is built on, he was in the Civil War and he lost his right arm and suffered a head wound. So I sent him that newspaper clip and he wrote me back. He's like, man, I've got chills.
Wow.
So yeah, just stuff like that's always a home run.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
A little more than a coincidence, it seems like, huh?
Yeah, you just don't know. Well, I've got another story in Franklin, Tennessee. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the Battle of Franklin. It was December 1863 or November 1863. The night before, the Union Army marched through Spring Hill and they walked right down Columbia Pike where all the Confederate soldiers were camping. And the rebels had received unclear orders about what to do, whether to engage or not. So the Unions rolled down the street. So they got to Franklin first and they dug in and they were waiting for the rebels to, attack them. So John Bell Hood, the commander, he has egg all over his face. He's got to do something. So he orders his 20,000 men to, a full frontal assault against the 20,000 dug in Union Army. So it was a suicide mission, really. And, thousands guys died. When the battle was over, they went to the square and every building became a hospital for the Union and the Confederacy. So at the end of the Franklin Square, there's a Starbucks. It's called the White Building. It was built in 1910. And it was a doctor's office. The doctor, when he built the building, he caught a disease from one of his patients. And shortly after it was built, it became an office building since then. Well, before that was built, there was an old mansion there that belonged to a prominent merchant. And so it's chopped up. There's a Starbucks on the end. There's a mattress store. There's an eye doctor in the middle and a mattress store on the other side. So the Starbucks is saying, hey, there's a bugler in our basement. Eye doctor says, hey, there's a drummer in our basement. The mattress guy's like saying, there's something in the basement. I don't know what it is. So a friend of mine, Mark Walsh, he's a professional investigator. He's got all the equipment. He's done this. He's been doing this since like the 80s, back before it was cool. So he and I camp out in the basement one night of the eye doctor office, and we're down there with a lady on the building, and we're just getting nothing. So I pull out my phone and I play the Battle Hymn of the Republic on YouTube, which had been like Yankee marching song. Everything goes nuts. Bells, whistles, lights, everything's just going crazy. So that was neat. And we go up to the examination room where the doctor had heard people talking into his ear. So same thing. We're sitting there for like 5 or 10 minutes getting nothing. I turn on the Battle Hymn of the Republic. It goes crazy. So finally, the lady who owns the building, she gets bored and she goes, what's your name? And out of this it's echo box thing, it was called. It was some piece of equipment he has. He goes, Drake. And Wendy goes, did you say Blake or Drake? He went, Drake, a second time. So then she said, did you say Drake? He went, yes. So like 3 confirmations of Drake. So I go back home. I think the next day I went to the archives and I started digging. There was a guy named Thomas Jefferson Drake who was a drummer in the 10th Ohio. And he died in the Battle of Franklin. Now I can't say he died in that mansion that became a hospital that night, but it's really weird that Drake came up 3 times that night. If you go to findagrave.com and you enter Thomas Jefferson Drake, you'll see a picture of him and his drum.
Nice.
Yeah, it's nuts. Stuff like that, man. It's always a home run.
Yeah, definitely.
So cool.
Wow. We just did a little investigation with another paranormal team at a haunted bed and breakfast, and we don't have like fancy equipment or anything, but they did, and it was really neat being with them and experiencing some of those things too. But we're just kind of
you
getting our
can,
feet wet.
you can like I've caught an EVP on my voice memo on my iPhone. I mean,
wow.
you can catch stuff with just an EMF meter in your iPhone.
True. Yeah.
It's neat.
Well, go ahead, Ron.
I've got a question. A lot of people, like are interested in that, but maybe members of their family, spouses, girlfriends, or whatever, maybe are not so interested. What's your wife think about what you do?
I mean, she used to be all for it, but since we had my baby or my little boy, she's kind of stepped back a little bit. She's a little more cautious, and I don't really. It's kind of a touchy subject sometimes, but yeah, I keep it away from them. But I mean, she realizes it's kind of like my job now, so she's very supportive. She encourages me, and I can't say enough great things about her. So, but yeah, I hate the separation of church and state, so to speak.
She's like, hey, you go do you, but just do it over there.
Don't bring nothing back with you. I really don't do any investigations anymore. I like doing the research anyway, because I'm a historian at heart, just digging in and just trying to figure out why things are the way they are and looking for crazy stories. That's what I enjoy. That's
a neat perspective, though. It gives you a really neat perspective on things. And that's one of my favorite things to do whenever we go to different places. Find a ghost tour, because you learn so much history. Yeah. A food tour and a ghost tour. Those are the two things to do. One question I had is, like, what's the most unusual or most frightening ghost story you've come across?
I mean, I don't really get scared. And the thing is, I've done this for a while now, and I can count on one hand the number of malevolent or evil things are out there. A lot of times it's just mischievous, silly stuff. There's some stuff here in Middle Tennessee. I was in a museum up here in Middle Tennessee one night, and a young girl, she made the mistake of saying something like, if something's here, it's going to have to beat me upside the head to get my attention. So we're walking around this museum, and there was a mannequin that's supposed to be possessed or whatever. Like, I've been up there and I've seen it just fall over when nothing's around. They say it moves. So check the cameras in the morning, and it's like this. Come back lunchtime, and it's over here doing this. It's weird stuff like that. So we're up there by this mannequin with some equipment out. And all of a sudden, this girl, I think she was an intern at the historic site across the street, and she's 18, 19 years old. She starts screaming. So I put my flashlight, take a picture of her, and there's a red handprint right there on her arm. Like, you can see visibly, like a hand like this smacked her. And I asked my buddy behind her, I said, hey, what's going on, man? What happened? He said, Alan, I was standing here, she was there, and she started screaming. Like, he didn't see anything. She was close up to him where he could have seen something, even though all the lights were off. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, there's all kinds of weird stuff.
So be careful what you put out there in the universe, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Besides that, is there, through all of your books, is there like one story that stands out the most to you?
As far as like a ghost story, just like my favorite story, or just anything.
Just your favorite story from.
Oh man, I've got a few. The one that jumps out to me right now, and it's not a ghost story; it's a grave robbing story. It's like in my books, I started out just doing ghost stories, but in Middle Tennessee, there's a couple. I found some galvanism cases where they try to revive bodies with electricity. It was a thing where, Mary Shelley published Frankenstein. All these crackpot doctors and scientists in the mid 19th century thought, "Oh, I can do it too." Yeah. So I've got it documented in my books: South Nashville, Franklin, St. Louis, Chicago, Knoxville. Like, I've got accounts of this happening all over the country. So I branched out. I don't do just ghost stories anymore. I got Frankenstein stuff. There's a vampire story in St. Louis and New Orleans. Let's see here, voodoo, and my New York book, and then Knoxville. But grave robbing, I did some Midwest books, and I went up there looking for ghost stories, like in Cincinnati, St. Louis, Chicago, and I found a bunch. But when I got to Cincinnati, I fell on this rabbit hole of grave robbing, and it's just, in the 1800s, you can make $20 in 1 week working as a laborer at the docks, right? Like in Cincinnati or St. Louis. Well, you can make $40 in one night by stealing one cadaver and selling it to medical college. That's like $1,300 in our money. You make it in one night. See, back then, the colleges, they had hundreds of students. Like in Cincinnati, had a handful of colleges. But they only got a few cadavers each month from the county. If you died in the prison or hospital and no one claimed your body in several days, they turn your remains over to the colleges. So it's supply and demand, right? You have the supply, you have very little demand, or you have the demand but very little supply. Sorry, I got that backwards. So the colleges would hire grave robbers, go raid the graveyards and get cadavers. So you guys have heard of Benjamin Harrison, the president, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was a former Union general. Once the war was over, he went back to Indiana. He went home to North Bend, Cincinnati, but decided to move to Indianapolis to start his practice. His grandfather was William Henry Harrison. I think he was our 8th president. His father was John Scott Harrison, a congressman. So Harrison, or Benjamin, wanted to go establish his own thing, and he's a rising star in the GOP party after the war. Well, he goes to Indianapolis. He does great as an attorney. He gets a telegram one day. Hey, your father's passed away. Come home. We got to lay him to rest. So he goes from Indianapolis, takes a train to Cincinnati. They have a service for his father. His sister and him and some other family members are walking around the cemetery after it's over. His sister walks over to the corner of the cemetery where her son, who died the week before from tuberculosis, was laid to rest. She starts screaming. His body's gone. The grave's been disturbed. So Benjamin runs over there. He's furious, but he's committed to giving a speech to raise some funds for the GOP in Indianapolis like 2 days later. He has to take the train back. He cannot go and figure out what's going on. So he tells his younger brother Johnny and his cousin George, hey, you guys go to Cincinnati and you find my nephew. So the next day, Johnny and George go to Cincinnati. They hire a former sheriff to be their liaison in town to kind of, grease the wheels, figure out what's what. So Johnny and George and the sheriff, they go to the top to the roof or to the attic of this medical college, the Ohio Medical College by the river. And the sheriff, there's no electricity, it's just candles and lamps, right? So the sheriff's walking over to the corner of the attic and he finds his shaft and there's a rope hanging down and he pulls on it. It's taut, something's on the line. So he finds this wheel next to it and this dark form starts to materialize out of the shaft. So the sheriff says, Johnny, come here a minute. Hold up your candle. Is this your nephew? So there's a man there on the line. He pulls the shawl back, holds the candle up. No, it's some old man. He said, well, hang on a second. Take my old lamp. Let's check again. So Johnny walks back over, pulls the shawl back. It's his dad. The grave robbers beat him in Cincinnati in 24 hours. So they got his nephew and his dad in a week. So they send word to Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis. He comes to Cincinnati. He wants the administrator's head on a pike. But the thing is, the college administrators are shielding the grave robbers because that's how they get the stuff for their students. So it turns into this great big war between the colleges and Benjamin Harrison that plays out in the papers, but they never do catch the grave robber. But you know why they can't catch the grave robber? He's a British spy. So during the Civil War, a guy named Thomas Beach over in England, he has a sense of adventure. He's 20-something years old. He comes to Illinois, and he enlists to fight for the Illinois infantry. He fought in the Battle of Nashville. Well, as he's serving, during that time, if you were drafted by the Union Army, you could hire people to take your place. You had enough money. And a lot of Irish immigrants came over here to do that. If you were conscripted, they took their place, took a big cash settlement, and just crossed their fingers, hope they survived. Well, a lot of those guys survived, and after the war, they formed this terrorist organization called the Fabian Brotherhood. And during that time, Canada was a British province. So these Irish nationalists started launching raids into Canada. Well, Thomas, he starts writing letters to his dad. Hey, this is going on over here. They're going to attack Canada. His dad takes letters to Parliament. So Thomas becomes a protected British asset. And when he gets turned back up for all the grave robbing stuff, he goes back to Great Britain. He wrote a best-selling autobiography. He's a hero in England. But over here, he's a scourge of the earth who stole the body of the father and son of the United States president. It's nuts. Hollywood could not make this stuff up.
No.
That's crazy.
I'm actually trying to make a mini series about it. I've made some scripts. I'm trying to get them in the right hands. So yeah,
that's great.
Yeah.
Wow, that'd be interesting. I'd sure watch it.
Yeah,
it's called the Harrison Horror in all the papers, and it played out for months. But like it's time goes by and people forget, and I've
never heard.
I uncover these stories, and I'm thinking, good grief, why is it's just sitting here for me to find,
Right? Yeah.
I'd never heard of that.
Oh, the grave robbing stories. I mean, there's a guy named William Cunningham also in Cincinnati. He was an old Irish immigrant like those other guys. Came here looking for work, and he finds he can make a bunch of money raiding graveyards. So, like, there's this newspaper account of him. One night, he picks up this cadaver. He sticks it in the back of his wagon. It's horse-drawn carriages back then. Well, one of the legs is sticking out. It's a really tall guy. So Cunningham takes the body and puts it up in the seat next to him. So He's riding down the street carrying this cadaver to the college, and a night watchman pulls up. Halt, who goes there? Oh, sir, it's me. It's Cunningham. Well, who's that? Oh, it's my pal Jimmy. He just can't hold his liquor. I swear, officer, I'm taking him home. He's a good, honorable Christian man. I'm get him home safely. He's going to be all right. Oh, y'all be safe now. I'll see you around. So Cunningham, he gets the horse and buggy going again, and he hits a rock, and the cadaver tumbles out of the wagon, and the watchman turns around. Come on, Cunningham, get in the wagon. We're going downtown. And that's just an old story I found. It's just one of many about this guy named They called him Old Man Dead. And I also got a script about that guy too.
It's like Weekend at Bernie's, but like 100 years before.
There was one night he raided a grave, and I think he got like there's 13 or 16 cadavers in one night, which is like he could just retire off that almost.
Yeah.
But he took him to the college, and he got a letter from the college. He had to go back the next day. They weren't going to pay him. All the bodies had smallpox, so he had to take them back to the graveyard.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Oh
yeah.
God.
The shenanigans are off the charts. Yeah, I mean, I've got stories for days about grave robbing. I'm probably going to make a grave robbing book because I've got so many wild stories.
Definitely, yeah.
Like Abraham Lincoln, someone tried to steal his body. Andrew Jackson, the same thing. There's presidents they were trying to steal their bodies too. It's nuts.
I would say they bring top dollar. They probably paid more for those.
Well, they were trying to hold them for ransom. They weren't for the colleges. They were to just kind of get the families or the government to pay for them to get them returned.
Oh.
There's a story of a guy in New York City. I think it's A.P. Stewart was his name. He was one of the wealthiest men in New York City when he died. Well, I guess like 9 months after he died, someone broke into his tomb at St. Mark's Churchyard. And they took his body. They held it for ransom. And there's conflicting reports on whether his wife paid for the body or not. But they say that she got it back eventually. Some say she didn't. But yeah, grave robbing stuff is nuts. There's a story in my Kentucky book, Ghost Stories and Graveyard Tales, Kentucky. This lady, this prominent attorney passed away. I think it was in eastern Kentucky. And they lay him to rest. And during the service, there's a lady walking around asking about, hey, is there a watchman watching the cemetery? Hey, who's guarding the body? And so like a day or two later, this lady is arrested for stealing the guy's body. And it turns out, to make a long story short, she got divorced from her husband like a year or two before, and he was her husband's attorney. Well, during the proceedings, she fell in love with him. And when she found out he died, she went to go steal his body.
Oh.
I was gonna say for what, but you know what? I don't want that answer.
Well, hey, love is a powerful thing. Where was it? Key West, Florida. This is back in the mid 20th century. There's this young girl. She's 20 years old, I believe. She got, I think, tuberculosis or maybe cholera. It was one of those diseases, and she got it. And she was taken to the hospital, and this old man named, they called him Count Von Coral, I think it was his name. And he was checking her out and watching over her. Well, she dies, but he's infatuated with her. So he has a little bit of money. He gets the parents to agree to let him buy a tomb to put her remains. So that night after the service, he breaks in, takes her body back home with him. And as her corpse rotted in his bed, like he would put like paper mache, he would make wigs with her own hair. Like he tried to preserve her body as best he could with the stuff he had. And how he got caught was he was dancing with her corpse in the window one night, and someone saw it, notified the police and the girl's sister. So who says true love is dead, right?
Oh,
it could be.
Well, yeah, there you go.
Being that neighbor that like sees this through the window.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell did I move into?
Like they're dancing like an ear falls off or something.
Oh gosh.
God.
They give you PTSD.
Her poor family was probably so upset.
Oh.
Yeah, once they got her remains back, they did bury her, but they kept it secret.
Yeah.
Because I think because the proceedings played out for a long time, in the court of public opinion, the people in Florida kind of felt bad for this kooky old man. And like they wanted to let him go. Like he was just in love, and it's cute, it's sweet. But I think he did like serve a minor sentence, and he went free. But they did hide the body because he did get out.
Yeah.
Oh. Wow. Goodness. Those are great.
This is what I do.
Yeah. I mean,
but they're so
that is
interesting though.
Intriguing, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely gonna get some of your books. And mentioning your books, Lindsay, can you pull up our slideshow?
Yeah.
We've got a picture of you here. I'm not sure which.
Yeah, I think
horror
that's
con.
that's it, one of them.
Mm-hmm. So you go and you set up a booth and you got your books there and stuff. I bet you meet some very interesting people like Ryan.
Yeah, and it's like they make fun of me. It's like I'll wear a blue polo like that. I'm a kind of boring, straight-laced guy. I just happen to be in like a weird field. And
Uh-huh.
people walk around with pink hair and black shirts. I'm the guy wearing a light blue polo. I mean, I'm the weird one there, not them.
Right. Oh, and I see the book cover behind you.
Yeah, the Fear and Folklore American Monsters.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
the
how
St. Louis
many?
book is right next to it. And if you want a cool vampire story,
Oh
so in the
yeah.
St. Louis book, I kept reading these old newspaper accounts. They called her the St. Louis vampire. And she was a Swiss immigrant who moved to St. Louis, and she had, I think, 2 or 3 children, but she got real sick, and she was in her, I think, late 20s. But she became convinced that with her condition, if she drank blood from a dying man, she would be cured of her ailments.
Uh-huh.
So every time they had an execution at the jail in St. Louis, she would go to the jailer and beg for like a vial of blood. And she became so persistent, they would change the execution dates and times to keep her away. Like if guy was getting hanged at 7, they would tell her, "Oh yeah, we're gonna hang him at 10:30." So when she got there, it already happened. Like she would be so brokenhearted because she couldn't drink the blood, and then she never get the blood, and she eventually died. But yeah, it was a thing that played out back in the mid 19th century. This lady had to have blood.
Wow, I've
I
never
wonder
heard
how
that
she got
story.
that in her head. Like,
Yeah, I mean, medicine was primitive back then, and
yeah.
she got some bad advice, obviously.
Wow,
really
that
stuck,
is-
I guess.
Yeah. So, how many of these like paranormal conferences do you usually go to a year?
I was at CreepyCon in Knoxville this past weekend, and it's more of a horror thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's not really a lot of paranormal conferences around here, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I did the National Horror Show about a month ago. I did Knoxville at CreepyCon. I'm doing Scarefest in Lexington. I mean,
Yes!
they
We're
kind
gonna
of
be there.
okay, cool, yeah. They kind of piggyback off each other, but I did Smoky Mountain Terror. I think that's where I met you guys. But there are really there are paranormal conferences, but mostly up north, northeast seems like.
Right.
Yeah.
And most, from what my experience, like I said, I've been to a few, and most of them go to like the Horror Fest or just whatever.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we came across. And I was really surprised that so many people there were so local, because I thought, a lot of the people were coming from way away, which some did. But like I said, I was just so surprised that so many people that were within an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours of where I live. I didn't think it was really that big, and it really surprised me. And then when I came across you and we talked for a few minutes, and I asked you a little bit about your experience, about your books, I was like, yeah, and I thought you was really interesting and I wanted to know more about you. And I was like, yeah, we got to have this guy on. So it took a minute to get to you, but, we wanted to make sure that we kind of schedule things right and we already had a couple of things in place. So, yeah, so far it's been awesome. Like I said, we loved hearing about you. It's even more interesting and more, than what I even expected. So
you set the bar pretty low, didn't you?
No. Well, you're definitely a storyteller, and people love that. And when you mix history in with it, that's just even better.
Yeah, it's funny. I do tours in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and back in until I guess the 60s or 70s, it was a small little farming community. But I got this little area where I'll walk around, tell stories, but we always in a graveyard. And I had to tell the Harrison horror because it's just too cool not to tell it or talk about. So I usually end the Hendersonville show with or Hendersonville tour with the Harrison horror.
So you do like ghost tours for people.
Yes, well, I do. I live in Gallatin, which is maybe 25 or 20 miles north of Nashville, northeast of Nashville, and Hendersonville is right down the street, closer to Nashville. And after I did the Gallatin book, I started doing some tours to raise money for some nonprofits, and people kept asking me to do them. I said, well, I'll just do them and just keep doing them. And they're very well received, and I get pictures and videos from people. And there's a historic site called Trousdale Place, which is on the end of the Gallatin Square. It's built in the 1830s. It belonged to Governor William Trousdale, and lots of folks died there during the Civil War. It was the home of the General Leisure Payne, who occupied the town. And when I did I've done 2 Gallatin books. And the first book I did, the lady who oversaw Trousdale Place lived, I think, in South Carolina or East Tennessee somewhere, and I couldn't catch up with her. She only came to town once a year for 2 days at Christmas time. And I got tired of chasing her, so I didn't include it in the first book. Well, there's new leadership, and they reached out to me. And and it's weird because that person was never there. These ladies are there all the time now. So they got something stirred up. Whatever's there was used to having the run of the place. Now they got to share it. So the first open house they did, so let me back up to tell the story. When I did the Gallatin book, I kept hearing the library in town was haunted. So I go to the library, and they keep telling me, no, it's not haunted. No ghost stories here. I keep going back. No, I don't know who told you that, but it's not haunted. So finally I get there, and there's an older woman. She said, honey, the old library is where the ghost is. So I go to the old library, which is now an office. So I walk in the door, and this lady looks at me and gives me the weirdest look, and just does like this and hides her face. So I walk past her thinking she's just ruder than hell. And I find a coworker, and I tell her, hey, I'm working on this book. They tell me it's haunted. She starts giggling. Go talk to her. So I go back to the lady who just kind of was really rude. And she's like, matter of fact, yes, there's a lady here, but she's not haunting us here. She's happy here. She wants to be here. She's back in the back. It's an older woman. She's like a bouffant, kind of poofy 60s hairdo. Okay, so I start looking through the archives. I think it was on a Facebook group, and I found a picture of Miss Nell McDonald, the former librarian, who was a librarian for like 40 years. And I sent her a picture, and she's like, that's her. She had the matching hairdo. So weird things always happen there with her, but I would take her with me to the square, and she and I walk around, and she would tell me things only I knew before the book even came out. I had some crazy stories with her, and then for the open house, I invited her. And she tells me she's an empath. She can't see a ghost, but she can sense and feel them. I'm not sure how it works. I'm not tuned in that radio link, but I know for a fact she's on to something. So the open house, I greet her at the door, but unbeknownst to me, she brought another empath with her from the Dominican Republic that I never met before. So she's about to walk into the house. The lady from the Dominican's walking in, and she just falls like in a heap over to the side. So I rush over. I just get some water. Let's take care of her. And she finally gets her bearings back. And the first empath is staring in the corner of this room. She's like, oh, he is so sorry. He feels awful this happened. He wants you to know he feels awful. He is so terribly sorry. And I was like, what? What's going on? She said, well, it's an older white man. And the lady from the Dominican, of course, she's not black. She's not white. She has dark olive colored skin. It's unique. And the older white gentleman who lives or resides in the place, he wanted to check her out. She was intriguing to him. So when he stepped forward to see her, she passed through him, and the energy just knocked her to the floor. Wow. It's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen, but I know for a fact that what I saw is what I saw. Yeah. But that's not just the only crazy story there. We've gotten pictures. There's a picture actually right in that window where that happened. I've got a picture the guy took on the ghost tour. It looks like Andrew Jackson or an old white man is standing there in the window. It's really weird. Wow. But Mary's room is probably the most haunted place in Trousdale Place. It was Governor Trousdale's granddaughter. She died there when she was 18. I think it was cholera or one of those weird diseases. And she just finishing school. She died of cholera. And, well, weird things happen in that room. The lady who oversees it sends me video footage, security cam footage. And the security footage, it's not always on. Something has to, the motion detection picks it up and turns it on. And there's multiple videos like this orb just kind of does this. The next night they go like this. You know, and in the room across the hall it goes like this.
Yeah.
It's really weird. And then one night she sent me one. The lights start flickering, and like this shiny, brilliant, bright light. It shines really bright and just dies. It goes away. So she sent that to me, and I showed it to my wife, and she's like, and I told her, I said, well, that's the sun going down. You know, I can debunk that. She said, you big dummy, the sun goes down every day. Why wouldn't they have that all the time? I said, okay, I guess you do. So, yeah, and I try to debunk what I can, because everything's haunted, nothing's haunted.
Yeah.
We get pictures at that house all the time.
Wow, that's cool. So it's open to the public.
I think they're not open all the time. They're open a lot more than they used to be, but you can go to Facebook and look up Trousdale Place. I think they have a website, trousdaleplace.org. Maybe just Google Trousdale Place, it'll come up. But yeah,
cool.
It's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. We might be making a trip.
They got Trousdale Place, Rosemont, just right down the street. That's where I told you I picked up an EVP with my recorder on my phone. I was talking to the director, outside. I was making notes for the book, and I recorded our conversation, and I'm about to leave, and that was right before my little boy was born, or I just had my little boy, and I made the remark of, it's funny because he and I were talking, and we find out that my last name is Sircy, which is a very unique last name. His mother's maiden name is Sircy. It turns out we're long lost cousins or distant cousins.
Wow.
And we're talking about that, and I say, hey, I had a little boy, and I'm the last of my grandfather's side, so the name will live on through my little boy. And when I went back that night, I was listening to a conversation. As soon as I say, the name lives on through my little boy, this woman's voice goes, "Oh, good." Like, I got chills. I sent it to the director. He was like, "Yeah, that's Catherine Guild. That's the judge's wife, the lady of the house."
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Well, she was happy for you.
But yeah, think in 1800s, a boy, that's, the name living on, it's another hand in the field,
Yeah.
someone to help around the house. I mean, that was a big deal having a boy back then.
It was. Yeah, for sure. Well, I heard or read somewhere that you also have a podcast. And Lindsay, if you'll go forward in the slideshow, we've got some more pictures that we've pulled of you. And here you are. Oh, I wanted to ask you about when you were on the news, WKYT. And so they had you on the news to talk about I watched the little video on YouTube. It was really cool. And what is Open Line?
It's just like a call-in show here in Nashville. They do it year round. They usually have me in October to talk to them.
Yeah. So people call in and ask you questions. That's cool.
Well, one time, I think the first time I ever did it, it's probably on YouTube somewhere. This lady calls in. She's like, "Yeah, do y'all believe in ghosts?" And I was like, "Well, I got some things I can't explain." She said, "You ever seen the Blair Witch? That's just a really strange movie. That just freaks me out when I watch it." And the moderator's like, "So what's your question? Have y'all seen the Blair Witch?" Yeah, a long time ago. So you never know what you're getting on these call-in shows.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty wild. Yeah, I guess you are pretty popular around Halloween. October hits. They're looking for, somebody that's knowledgeable about the spooky side of life.
Yeah,
that's cool though that you've, been on there.
The kicker is, like, in October, I was telling somebody this in Knoxville, like, I want to sit on my couch and watch college football, but no, I got to be out every Saturday doing these events. So it was fun to me.
Well, you can always go back and watch the football games later, I guess.
Yeah, I usually have them on in the background. It's funny. I did there's a paranormal expo in Nashville last year, and my buddy Eric Freeman Sims from the Unseen Paranormal. It's a very popular podcast. You guys check it out. Mm-hmm. But he's planning it, and he picks the date of the Alabama-Tennessee game. And I said, "Man," "you might want to stay away from that date. Alabama plays Tennessee." "Oh, people at Paranormal don't care about football." I said, "I don't know, man. It's kind of like a religion, just I'd stay away from that date." So it was kind of busy that morning, but 2:30 kicked off. The show died, and he was just cussing and grumbling under his breath. The funniest thing.
He should have listened to you.
Yeah.
Well, Lindsay, keep going with the slideshow, because now and keep going another one. So we want to definitely promote, the website, southernghoststories.com. And did you have, or do you still have a podcast as well?
Yeah, it's kind of, my wife and I started it back in 2019, and then my little boy had an accident and he hurt his leg, and we, a 2-year-old's hard as it is, and you have one hurt leg, it got really hard. We got to shut it down for a little while. I've been trying to bring it back, but I've been traveling so much. It's like, I'll do really good. I'll have like 2, 3, 4 weeks, and I try to do 2 episodes a week. And they're short shows, 10 to 15, 20 minutes. I don't talk all day.
Yeah.
But I was doing it, and I'll try to do it regularly, and then I'll get sidetracked and go to New York and forget about it. And I think I dropped one a week or 2 ago, and I've got one more I've been working on. I got a 5-year-old man, and these books keep me busy. So
right, I'm sure. It's hard. Yeah, and a 5-year-old, whoo, that's a lot of energy right there.
Oh yeah, he's fun though. I love him to death.
Well, that's great. Now this next slide, I have to ask you what's going on here, because I saw this on your Facebook page and I was like, I am the biggest Batman fan ever. Okay.
That was a Halloween party at my house years ago. That's my cousin. That's me and the Riddler. We were being funny, and I think somebody took a picture of us.
That is great. I love that. I had to show that because you got a good sense of humor.
It's funny. Like, I don't take myself very seriously. I have fun with this stuff, and it's like. Yeah. Someone told me something. "Oh, yeah, I'm your fan." I'm like, "Man, you support what I do. You're a supporter. You're not a fan." It's it's kind of pretentious call someone your fan, I think.
Yeah. Do you have family members who like are very supportive outside of your wife, are very supportive and into this kind of thing?
I mean, I got some cousins that think it's fun. My family's kind of scattered. So, I mean, they all support me. And my sister surprised me at a tour I was doing back last year. So, yeah, they're all supportive. Everybody's on board.
Oh, neat. That's neat. Well, you might look out and see us on one of your tours sometime.
Come on up.
Yeah, definitely. And we're coming to Scarefest in Lexington. We're excited about that. And I know Ron's been to some of the horror cons or paranormal cons or whatever you call them, but this will be mine and Lindsay's first, so we're really excited.
Yeah, I'm doing a panel at Scarefest about grave robins. So that's going to be fun.
Yes. Ooh. That will be fun. Are you going to do it on Friday or Saturday?
Whenever they tell me. I think it's Saturday, but I can't remember.
Okay. Oh, I hope it's Saturday. We're getting there Friday, but probably not till, Friday late afternoon.
I kind of gave away my Harrison horror story on the show, so Jack's surprised when I tell it, okay?
We will definitely. Now, we want to also promote you on social media, and we'll share this on our socials as well, but I was looking at where all your books are available, and I saw Amazon.com, Audible.com, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and Target. Is there anywhere else where people can buy those?
Yeah, but all those locations vary. Like Barnes & Noble, I had them at the one in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and the store closed. And I went to the Barnes & Noble in Murfreesboro, which is next closest. They only had one of my titles. So every store is different. Okay. Don't go to Barnes & Noble thinking you'll find them all. You can always order them through there. Walmart and Target's weird. I think I only know of one Target store that's carried my stuff in the past. So, yeah, each store is different. They can always order them for you. And Amazon.com if all this fails.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Now, is Ron and Lindsay, do you have any more questions? Or Alan, do you have any other weird stories you'd like to share?
Well, I got some books dropping in September. I've got, let's see here, Fear and Folklore, American Witches, that drops, which, basically just wild witch stories I've found over the years. And we have witch trials in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Tennessee, Virginia, and just like folklore stories about witches in Maine and all over the country. Yeah. Let's see here. I've got Ghost Stories and Graveyard Tales, Alabama. I've worked on that since 2019 off and on, and I finally knocked it out. And it's weird. It's like this year I'm dropping 5 books. Like I didn't write all 5 books this year. Like I've got a back burner mile long, and I'm just dabbling here and there. And I finally knocked out the Alabama book, and the Florida book I've also worked on since 2019. Ghost Stories and Graveyard Tales, Florida drops in September. Ghost Stories and Graveyard Tales, New York. And Southern Ghost Stories Knoxville comes out also. That's going to be, that's why I was in Knoxville this past weekend. Hopefully it's going to do well. Knoxville's a weird place, man. They had Frankenstein story, grave robin, ghost stories, voodoo. Voodoo's crazy stuff too. So, yeah.
This sounds like
strange. I've heard some grave robbing stories, but I've never heard like reanimation stories.
Yeah, I mean, it was a thing. And I'll tell you one from my favorite's the one in South Nashville. There's a guy named Knox Martin. He moved up here after the war. He's a former slave. Well, he made an agreement with this guy to work in his field as like a field hand or a farm hand, whatever. Well, they had a falling out, and he agreed to stay on for a year. But after like a few weeks, he decided, no, I want to go back home to Alabama. And the farmer said, no, I'm not going to pay you if you go back today because you told me you're going to be here for a year. So they had a dispute about the wages. And what's really weird is this guy was living with a lady who was a witch or practiced Wicca, or she's from Haiti. She's probably, I don't guess it was witchcraft or voodoo. I'm not sure what it was, but he believed in it. And she kept saying, this guy's going to kill you if you don't kill him first. So he went there one night and bludgeoned him and his wife in the bed. And the next day, the wife's brother came and heard the baby crying. He walked in and found them all bloody and dead, and the baby was crawling around on his mother trying to nurse. It's an eerie sight. So they find out it's Knox, the former slave. They throw him in jail. He's convicted of murder. So back then, the old hanging field was where Trevecca Nazarene College is in Nashville on Murfreesboro Road. Well, hanging was like the fair. Like thousands of people would walk from all over to come see the spectacle. So what happened was they wound up to hang him. And after the hanging, they had a shed behind the gallows. and there's, it's old wood. They're pulling wood boards off to see what's going on. They had some windows. Well, Knox has sold his body for some silver to some local doctors. They take him in there. They hook up to electric current. Bzzz, and his eyes open, his mouth opens. He shoots him off the table. But once electricity runs out, he just falls back. So all these people are watching this in that shed. So after that happens, the doctors, they throw him in a buggy and they race to Lindsley Hall, it was called something different then. It was a college. Now it's part of the Ben West complex here in Nashville for the Metro government. But they take him in there. They lock all the doors. No one gets in. And strangely, they just don't talk about what happened. So what happened was the doctor wanted to write a pamphlet to tell what really happened, but it was real hush-hush. So everybody's wondering what's going on. Well, the local newspaper, the Tennessean, gets a letter to the editor a few days later, and someone says, hey, there's a man named Knox Martin in Lafayette, Tennessee. He says he's walking home to Alabama. A day or two later, someone says, hey, there's a tall man named Knox who said he was hanged in Nashville. He's going home to Montgomery. A few days after that, a prominent banker or a prominent official in Nashville got a big box with a tin-type picture of Knox Martin and a piece of rope that was allegedly used in the hanging. So I'm 99.9% sure this guy was hanged and killed, but everybody in Nashville is talking, oh, is Knox Martin still alive? It's just weird. There's stories about, witnesses seeing him, and the rope and tin-type gets turned into the Tennessean too. It's kind of like hysteria. Is this guy alive or is he dead? And back then, folks are naive. They don't know. So Knox Martin is still alive and he's walking home to Alabama to see his mother. So it's just nuts.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Wow.
Honestly, if I lived back then and I heard this story, 100% I'd be like, oh my gosh, she's coming back.
Yeah.
I would have believed it.
Yeah, and the whole voodoo thing was kind of in the background too. Like, was this lady protecting him? It's I've actually got a screenplay about that one too. I'm trying to do something with. So yeah, I find that was crazy stuff, and I got to do something with it.
Yeah.
Which I'm glad you do, because I never would know this stuff, but I think it's so fascinating.
Yeah.
It really is. And I hope that our listeners will, I want to binge this, a Netflix series. I want to binge the books like a Netflix series.
I know.
Yeah.
It's funny. I actually met some people in Knoxville who work in TV and movies. I was telling them the Harrison horror thing, and their jaw was on the ground.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, yeah, it should be a documentary or a movie. I'm like, no, it's got to be a miniseries because you got to do the flashback from the grave robber getting popped in Toledo. So it's
that would be so good.
It would. Yeah, well, you heard it here first, listeners.
Somebody.
Yeah, I hope you can. I hope that develops for you. Okay.
Yeah, we'll see.
I have a question. You talking about the Blair Witch and how you done the the horror map and how you done that. It kind of prompted some things I was thinking about, like during COVID. Was thinking about me and my dad, and I know Rhonda, his brother Steve, we're we believe in Bigfoot. It'd be cool to find them. We would have treated it like a murder case, like a serial killer. How you put the pins in the thing, in the map, and say it was solid this time, and this time, kind of like what you do with your horror map. Have you ever done anything like that to try to track some mysteries down, like? Somebody claims that there's a vampire, or maybe they saw Bigfoot, or maybe they saw, because you track down some people for your research to kind of help with your investigations. Have you ever thought about doing anything like that?
Oh man. As far as cryptids and stuff?
Cryptids, or maybe a vampire, maybe a real witch, or just something off the wall?
Well, I've got the cryptid book. It's just kind of, and it's all kind of just, to me, it's folklore, because I'm not saying Bigfoot doesn't exist because I don't really know. I mean, there's a pretty damn big place, and I ain't seen all of it yet. So I don't really know about all that. But in the book, I try to go on the folklore and just the history and the sightings, like the big sea serpent there behind me. It kind of stems from New Jersey, where these sea captains, 1870, were out there, and they see, it's probably a whale shark, but they kept seeing it out there in the ocean. And, oh my God, it's a sea serpent. And they'd see it on the Long Island Sound in New York, and they'd see it, in different places, and it just became this big legend that was a sea serpent. But in reality, it was something they just didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Right. And the Jersey Devil, it's like the Bell Witch in Nashville, or Adams, Tennessee. It's a story of a legend that became a story of a tale that became a legend. And no one knows what's what because everybody keeps talking about it, and it's just so yeah. I like the folklore behind it all. I know it's not like a politician trying to answer your question there.
No, like I said, I just thought you'd be really good at something like that, because you're always like, could it possibly be? Could they be a vampire? Could they be?
Yeah, I don't know if I could go out camping out in the woods for weeks at a time, though.
Yeah, or like, you go certain places and like, yeah, this, there's been reports of like, blood going missing or something. Could be a vampire or something. You'd like to get into it.
Yeah, like CSI or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Allen, have you ever included anything in any of your books about the Bell Witch?
Yeah, and it's weird because it's like the Jersey Devil, like I told you. It's a story of a tale that's become a legend. And like everywhere I go, someone could be, hey, the Bell Witch, my cousin took a rock from the cave and wrecked her car a day or two later. It's like you hear that story a million times.
Yeah.
So I think you showed a picture of it earlier. I got a book called Southern Ghost Stories, Tennessee Tales. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like all my books are region specific. I got Franklin, Nashville, Chattanooga, Knoxville. I try to stick to the big cities, but Tennessee is a very big place. And there's stories in like Jamestown, Tennessee, and Portland, Tennessee, Smyrna, Tennessee, Spring Hill, Tennessee. And just Tennessee Tales is where I just put all the random small stories. And I included the Bell Witch. And what I tried to do with that story was I'm not going to uncover any new ground. So I kind of told like the backstory. And one thing that really intrigued me, because I'm a historian at heart, is the Andrew Jackson story. Because growing up in Middle Tennessee, you always hear, Andrew Jackson went there to see if it was true, and he had his own experience. So before I wrote that story, I knew someone who worked at the Hermitage, and I went to him and I said, look, I've got this story about Andrew Jackson, Bell Witch. Is it just kind of a tale, or is it legit? He said, well, look, Senator Bell was friends with Jackson. We know for a fact he was out there half a dozen times, and Adams visiting him. Now, did he have an incident with the Bell Witch while he was out there? I can't tell you for sure he did, but we know he was there several times. So I thought that's good enough for me. So I put it in the book about the story about Andrew Jackson, his experience with the Bell Witch.
Mm-hmm. That story has always fascinated me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And really, I think it's just dark native energy because it's not a witch. It's an old cave where the Native Americans live. And I think in Native American energy or ghost stories is generally darker than other stories.
Right. Well, I know our listeners are going to love this episode, and we do appreciate you kicking off our September Spooktacular. And
it's kicking off. Like this episode was so interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And we weren't on the air last September. We started in October, so we're coming up on a year anniversary.
Congratulations!
Wow.
It's hard to do a podcast. I know
it is. It really is.
A lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but we kind of just started out doing it for fun because, we just like the paranormal stuff, and it's really become a really neat part of our lives, and getting to visit, places and meet like-minded people is really fun. And, we're growing, but we're not doing it for that. We're just doing it because, we like it. And
well, Joe Rogan started his podcast, was it 10 years ago, just for fun, and look at him now. So
True. Well, we will let you go and enjoy your evening, but we appreciate you again so much giving us your time and telling us all these neat stories. I definitely, I hadn't heard of you before, Ryan met you, and definitely want to binge those books. That's a spooky, listeners, if you can, that'd be a spooky binge read for October coming up. So we will say goodbye to you, and we'll let Lindsay kind of take us out.
All right, guys, and Champ is about to come up here too, so he might join in. But this has been our first episode for September Spooktacular, and we have a ton of other cool stuff planned, so make sure you tune in. But until then, stay spooky.
Bye. Thank you again, Ellen.